Boom. The space behind Chen twisted violently. Within the distorted space, the vast Supremacy roared, and the surging spiritual energy swept outward, completely resisting the overwhelming pressure that was descending. Chen looked up, his eyes reflecting light as he stared at the four massive palms approaching. His hands suddenly formed seals, and brilliant spiritual light erupted from his body, as if a dragon's roar echoed within that light. Boom! The four giant palms crashed down like lightning, striking the very spot where Chen stood. The ground immediately trembled, and massive cracks spread out, causing the entire area to collapse. Countless eyes were fixed on the spiritual light mirror, wondering if the new leader of the 9 Nether Palace had been taken care of. With 4 first-grade Supreme experts attacking simultaneously, their combined power was not to be underestimated. The 9 Nether's beautiful face remained calm, but Tang Bing and Tang Ro's faces paled slightly. For Supreme Dharma bodies stood tall, their gazes fixed on the collapsed area, but their expressions subtly changed. There was no sign of Chen at all. "Be careful!" A low shout rang out from all 4 of them. Roar! However, just as their warning was uttered, the space behind them suddenly tore open, and a dragon-like shadow, seemingly made of light, shot out from the tear. The 4 Supremes' faces changed at once, their eyes filled with shock. How could Chen, a mere first-grade Supreme, traverse through a spatial rift? Only those above 5th-grade Supremes had the power to do such a thing. But their doubts were not for Chen to answer. The dragon shadow sped out of the space tear, shimmering with light, and transformed into a tall figure. His face was cold, his hands swiftly forming seals. Immediately, a dragon's roar and an elephant's bellow resonated from the Supreme Sea. Boom! A purple and a black beam of light, as fast as thunder, burst out from the Supreme Sea and merged above Chen, transforming into a gigantic purple dragon and a thunderous elephant. Chen's hands suddenly came together. The purple dragon engulfed in violet flames, and the thunderous elephant wrapped in black lightning collided violently. A terrifying spiritual shockwave exploded, sending the 4 towering Supreme Dharma bodies flying backward. Hiss hiss. Chen's face grew solemn, his hands trembling slightly as the seal formations changed in a dazzling blur. Amid the raging spiritual energy, a dragon-elephant light disk, about the size of a meter, began to materialize. The light disk was purple and black, within which a dragon and an elephant seemed to tower over it. An indescribable and terrifying spiritual force rippled out, causing the space to crack with fine fractures. Kill him! The 4 leaders of Mang Mountain immediately realized the terrifying power contained within the dragon-elephant light disk. Their hearts shook as they shouted fiercely. Withered wood finger! The 4 of them simultaneously cried out. A torrent of spiritual energy howled as it transformed into 4 energy pillars resembling withered wood. They shot toward Chen like lightning. Chen's eyes slightly lifted, and a cold glint appeared in his black pupils. The changing seals suddenly froze. Dragon-elephant disc. He extended his long finger into the air. The dragon-elephant light disc turned into a beam of light and shot out. As it passed, the space itself was torn apart, leaving a long trail of cracks. The 2 forces collided in the sky, and in front of countless watching eyes, they crashed together. Boom! The visible spiritual energy storm rampaged wildly, flattening the forest below in an instant. In the sky, violent and unmatched spiritual energy waves clashed, eroding one another in waves. Chen actually blocked the attack from the 4 Supremes, someone exclaimed in surprise. Even amid the violent forces, the purple-black light showed no sign of faltering. Chen really has impressive skills. To become the new leader of the 9 Nether Palace, he's certainly not simple. Chen blocked it. Tang Bing and Tang Ro's beautiful eyes also revealed surprise. You all underestimated Chen, 9 Nether smiled faintly. She had personally experienced the power of Chen's 9 dragons and 9 elephants art. Those 4 thought they could stop his attack with this. They were dreaming. At the moment this thought passed through the 9 Nether's heart, the sky suddenly erupted with dazzling purple-black hues. Purple flames and black lightning rampaged through the air, and where they struck, the 4 massive fingers, resembling withered tree trunks, shattered explosively. Countless people widened their eyes in shock. Retreat. The 4 leaders of Mang Mountain also reacted with horror in their eyes, hurriedly shouting in alarm. The 4 supreme Dharmakayas retreated rapidly, their steps covering 1,000 feet in an instant. Chen watched as the 4 withdrew, a cold smile curling at the corner of his mouth. If the power of the 9 dragons and 9 elephants art was truly like this, it certainly couldn't be rated as a near-perfection level divine technique. Whoosh! Chen flicked his finger, and the raging purple flames and black lightning condensed sharply. They intertwined like 2 beams of light, and with a whoosh, they vanished between heaven and earth. In an instant, they appeared before the thinnest supreme powerhouse, whose face changed drastically, clearly realizing that he had become Chen's target. Strike at 1 finger rather than 10, Chen thought. While the 9 dragons and 9 elephants art was incredibly powerful, his cultivation was still shallow. It was impossible to defeat all 4 supremes instantly, but taking down 1 would suffice. Withered wood method. The thin supreme powerhouse roared, and immediately, withered cracks spread across his supreme Dharmakaya. From a distance, it looked like a dying tree, standing alone in the vast sky. Boom. However, Chen paid no attention. The purple flames and black lightning transformed into a purple dragon and a thunder elephant, crashing violently into the giant supreme Dharmakaya with an unstoppable force. Bang! At the moment of impact, it was as if a volcano had erupted. The terrifying shockwave spread out, and the withered wood supreme Dharmakaya shattered on impact. A disheveled figure was flung out, blood pouring out as he fell heavily, crashing into the ground and creating an enormous, deep hole. His aura was faint and dim, clearly on the brink of death. Hiss! Countless people gasped in shock, unable to believe that within just an instant, a supreme powerhouse using the supreme Dharmakaya had been defeated by Chen. Withered great. The remaining 3 supreme powerhouses' faces changed drastically, their eyes filled with intense killing intent. They glared at Chen as if they wanted to devour him. I will tear you apart. The 3 of them shouted furiously, and their massive supreme Dharmakayas charged at Chen again, the spiritual energy in the air vibrating violently under their fists. Rise! Chen looked at the 3 coming toward him, his black eyes still cold as ice. He raised both hands, and suddenly, the forest below exploded, revealing a spiritual array formed by 3 black lotuses. Demonic lotus slaughter array. Chen changed his hand seals, and the 3 black lotuses shot up, connecting their heads and tails, crashing once more into one of the supreme Dharmakayas. Boom! The black light spread like ink, and the withered supreme Dharmakaya immediately turned into a ghostly black color, as cold as stone, before shattering with a series of crackling sounds. Uft! The supreme Dharmakaya shattered, and the supreme powerhouse was sent flying, blood spraying everywhere as he was heavily wounded. The 2 remaining supreme Dharmakayas also stopped in their tracks. Fear appeared in their eyes as they realized they could not fathom why, in just a few minutes, they had suffered such heavy losses. Of course, it wasn't just them who were confused. Even the onlookers who were watching the battle were stunned, their expressions full of disbelief. This Chen, whose strength seemed comparable to the 4 leaders of Mang Mountain, had erupted with such terrifying combat power. In just 2 moves, he had taken down 2 of them. The 2 remaining Supremes in the sky dared not approach any further. They didn't know whether Chen had more hidden moves. If they were to be attacked like the others, they would be no different from the previous 2. Retreat. The 2 exchanged glances, and without hesitation, they shouted in unison. Chen's 2 moves had intimidated them greatly. The 2 supreme Dharmakayas retreated, their fighting spirit completely extinguished. Now you want to leave? Chen watched as the 2 retreated, a cold smile curling on his lips. Since he had already made his move, he would naturally show no mercy. Moreover, this was no longer the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, where being too kind or indecisive would be the most foolish thing to do. He formed hand seals again, and a beam of light shot out from the top of his head. A pagoda surged into the air, expanding rapidly as it slammed down, trapping the 3rd Supreme Dharma body inside. On the pagoda, a golden dragon roared as golden flames surged. Within just a few breaths, The third Supreme Dharma body was burned to nothingness, its blackened form falling helplessly to the ground, with barely a trace of vitality left. Another Supreme had been defeated. The last leader of Mang Mountain was now terrified, his soul nearly leaving his body as he fled desperately. From a distance, one could see a giant, in a sorry state, rushing out from the Golden Pool Peak, not daring to stop for a moment. Chen watched the fleeing figure, not chasing after it, but instead letting out a quiet sigh of relief. He had used 3 powerful trump cards consecutively, and even he was beginning to feel the strain. Most of the spiritual energy within the Supreme Sea had been consumed. However, he was very satisfied with how quickly he had taken down 3 first-grade Supremes. His figure slowly descended from the air, his black eyes scanning around. As soon as he did, shadows of figures hurriedly retreated, not daring to show any hostility. Chen paid no attention to them and turned to swiftly fly toward the summit of Golden Pool Peak. He figured that from now on, no one would dare to make a move against him so easily. At the foot of Golden Pool Peak, countless people watched the retreating figure in the spiritual light mirror. The once bustling atmosphere had quieted down. Shock was evident on everyone's face as they realized just how many terrifying trump cards this new leader of the 9 Nether Palace had hidden. Fighting 4 opponents and killing 3. That record was truly terrifying. In the sky, the 3 sovereigns silently watched the spiritual light curtain. Their eyes were fixed on the young figure, and even the enigmatic sleeping king opened his eyes. This young man, truly extraordinary. Chen won. On the stone platform of the 9 Nether Palace, the Tang sisters, Tang Bing and Tang Ro, stared blankly at the spiritual light curtain. The figure of the young man was gradually disappearing. It was only now that they came to their senses, and their eyes lit up with joy. Tang Ro couldn't help but cheer, and even the normally composed Tang Bing let out a small laugh. Chen's display of power had been completely unexpected. The 4 leaders of Mang Mountain had some reputation in the Great Luo Heaven domain, and their combined strength was considerable. Even if they faced someone with the strength of a second-grade Supreme, they should have been able to resist. Yet now, they had suffered such heavy losses at Chen's hands. The performance of that young man had caught everyone's attention. Among the 9 Nether Guards, people like Shan were also filled with admiration. Their respect for Chen had grown even more. No matter where they were, power was the ultimate principle. If the 9 Nether Guards had such a leader, it might not be a bad thing. The mountain ascent battle is just beginning. If we can't secure the final quota, all of this previous performance will be meaningless, 9 Nether said calmly. She glanced at the jubilant sisters and smiled. How could it be meaningless? Chen is still a bit younger, and he has only just arrived in the Great Luo Heaven domain. If he fails, it's understandable. Even if he fails this time, he will surely win next time, Tang Ro argued, seeming to defend Chen. After all, he had already done well enough. Tang Bing, on the other hand, said nothing. Compared to Tang Ro, she was naturally more mature. While she also knew that Chen had done very well, sometimes reality was just that cruel. No matter how outstanding you are, in the end, only those at the very top get the spotlight. And those who become stepping stones, the countless failures, would never be noticed. If Chen didn't secure the quota in the end, perhaps the shock he caused earlier would fade away instantly. At most, some would feel a little regret for him, and then he would be forgotten, as he would just be another failure by then. 9 Nether looked at the 2 girls, whose excitement had already waned, her red lips curling slightly. She then stared at the vast spiritual light curtain, muttering, "But..." As the area surrounding the 9 Nether Palace erupted in excitement, the Blood Eagle Hall appeared to be eerily quiet, its atmosphere tense and strange, with many of the powerful warriors inside exchanging uneasy glances. They furtively glanced at the Blood Eagle King sitting on his throne, his expression unreadable. They dared not disturb him at this moment, as they could sense that his heart was likely boiling with rage. Crack! The armrest of the Blood Eagle King's throne silently cracked with fine fractures as his chest heaved deeply, suppressing the fury building within. Indeed, for useless fools, he muttered to himself. His sharp, cold eyes, which were locked on the spiritual energy screen, flickered with a chilling glint before he leaned back against his throne, his expression indifferent. Although Mu Chen's breakthrough past the four Supremes of Mang Mountain caught him off guard, it wasn't too surprising. After all, as long as Mu Chen didn't secure the final spot, all of this would have been for nothing. The contest for the Great Luo Golden Pool was just beginning. On the towering Golden Pool peak, golden torrents continued to pour down like an overwhelming cascade. The sight of the rushing torrents sent chills down many spines. Luckily, they were not directed at any one person. Otherwise, even those at the first and second grade supreme levels would likely struggle to reach the mountaintop, let alone the 9 kings, who would also find it nearly impossible. At this moment, amidst what looked like a golden forest, 2 figures stood with their feet upon the forest. Their gazes were fixed on the distant horizon, where Mu Chen and the 4 leaders of Mang Mountain had just engaged in a fierce battle. Mu Chen actually defeated the 4 Supremes of Mang Mountain. Wu Tian frowned slightly as he gazed into the distance. He had witnessed the battle earlier, and the techniques Mu Chen displayed were indeed powerful. No wonder he could instantly kill a first-grade Supreme. Wu Tian furrowed his brow, but then smiled. This is getting interesting. Though Mu Chen's victory over the 4 first-grade Supremes surprised him, it was nothing too extraordinary. With his current strength, accomplishing this wasn't difficult. The 4 Supremes of Mang Mountain didn't pose much of a threat in his eyes. The ranking of Supremes wasn't something that could be easily compensated for by numbers. It seems that the heavens are giving me an opportunity. Chao Feng squinted his eyes slightly, and then smiled lightly. Yeah, this will also let others see the difference between the new and old leaders of the 9 Nether Guard. Wu Tian chuckled. But let's not worry about him for now. Let's focus on reaching the peak first. This time, I'll try to get there a little earlier. As he said this, he turned his gaze toward the deeper parts of Golden Pool Peak, licking his lips like a hungry wolf eyeing its prey. He would not stop until he reached his goal. Oh, Chao Feng raised an eyebrow. Are you planning to take action against Zhou Yu? Currently, Wu Tian ranked 3rd among the 4 great commanders. If he could defeat Zhou Yu, his position would rise. However, Zhou Yu was a general under the mountain-splitting king's command, with a brilliant military record, making him a formidable opponent. Although Chao Feng's strength had surged due to the resources of the Blood Eagle Hall, he understood that it would be difficult to shake up the rankings of the 4 great commanders in the short term. However, if it were Wu Tian, perhaps he had the ability. This 3rd position is quite unsatisfactory. Wu Tian grinned, revealing his white teeth, then said no more. He flicked his sleeve, and his figure shot forward like a hawk, tearing through the golden torrents, racing toward the mountaintop at lightning speed. Seeing this, Chao Feng immediately followed, and as they passed by some powerful warriors, those warriors dared not challenge them. After all, 2 of the 4 great commanders were present. Colliding with them would be tantamount to seeking death. As Wu Tian and Chao Feng resumed their ascent, 2 figures stood in midair at different points in the deeper parts of the mountain. They were Su Qing and Zhou Yu, the top 2 ranked among the 4 great commanders. They gazed at the spot where Mu Chen had fought earlier. A flicker of surprise passed through their eyes, but they said nothing. They only showed slight interest, knowing that the contest for the Great Luo Golden Pool was bound to be filled with twists and turns. Meanwhile, while everyone's attention was drawn to Mu Chen's battle, the main character of the event, Mu Chen, had already pushed his speed to the limit, heading straight for the mountaintop. In that vast golden torrent, the faint sound of dragon roars could be heard. Suddenly, a dragon shadow swept through the space, swimming in the golden flood. At such speed, it effortlessly surpassed the strong individuals ahead. Those who were overtaken by this dragon shadow changed their expressions. After some hesitation, none of them made a move, for they had no confidence in defeating a powerhouse who could defeat the 4 Supremes of Mang Mountain. This dragon shadow, of course, was formed by Mu Chen. He had obtained a divine movement technique called the Dragon Soar Art from the White Dragon Supreme. At first, the technique greatly assisted him, but as his strength grew, the effect of the Dragon Soar Art gradually weakened until he reached the Supreme Stage. After breaking through to the Supreme Stage, Mu Chen was finally able to use the highest realm of the Dragon Soar Art, the Dragon Soar. At this level, he could transform into a dragon shadow, and with the power of this technique, he could tear space apart for short distances. It was because of this power that he had managed to avoid the blockade of the Force Supremes of Mang Mountain, which was like a skynet. Now, Chen was confident that if he fully activated the Dragon Soar art, even a second-grade Supreme would not be able to catch up to him. Thanks to this speed, Chen, within less than 10 minutes, had left the second tier behind and caught up with the first tier. Having experienced the previous battle, he no longer needed to conceal his power. The strength he displayed now would make anyone think twice before challenging him. Whoosh! The dragon shadow flew by, distorting space, and in a flash, it appeared 1,000 feet away. Inside the dragon shadow, Chen's gaze swept over the area. He was now nearing the peak of Golden Pool Peak. In his perception, there were more than 20 distinct spiritual energy fluctuations in this area, each one incredibly powerful. Compared to the previous supreme-level powerhouses he had encountered, these were even more formidable. The strong individuals who had made it into this first tier were undoubtedly the best of the climbers. Chen raised his head and looked into the distance, where a brilliant golden platform stood. The golden light on the platform flickered as if it were made of gold. He knew that this was the Great Luo Gold Terrace, the only passage to the Great Luo Golden Pool. Only by passing through there could one qualify to reach the summit. He tapped his toes, and the dragon shadow shot out. But just as he covered 100 feet, his form suddenly halted. The dragon shadow dissipated, and he transformed back into his human form. Chen stood in midair. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the vast forest sea below. In the distance, he saw several figures standing still, spaced apart. Each of these figures had a sharp gaze, like eagles or falcons, with immense spiritual power circulating around them, creating an almost whirlwind-like effect. These individuals all had the right to approach the Great Luo Gold Terrace. However, there were limited spaces on the platform, so to get there, one needed overwhelming strength to break through. Chen gazed at these figures in their fluttering robes, their eyes fierce. He couldn't help but lick his lips, and a fiery battle intent erupted in his black eyes. This was the final step. No one could stop me. Above the golden glowing forest sea, Chen stood in the air. His sharp black eyes looked ahead. In the distance, he could vaguely make out 7 figures standing. These 7 figures were spaced about 1,000 feet apart, with tremendous spiritual energy fluctuations radiating around them, causing a whirlwind to stir. Their gazes toward each other were filled with wariness and caution. They knew that to ascend to the Great Luo Gold Terrace, the others would be the greatest obstacle. These 7 figures came from the leading forces of the Great Luo Heaven Domain. Anyone among them, in a one-on-one fight, would not be weaker than the Force Supremes of Mang Mountain. Otherwise, they wouldn't have remained at the forefront of the climbers. Because of this, when they encountered each other, a fierce battle would surely ensue. Anyone attempting to ascend the Great Luo Gold Terrace from this direction would undoubtedly provoke the hostility and attacks of the 7. As Chen appeared, the 7 pairs of eyes instantly focused on him. Their expressions changed as they recognized him, especially after his previous battle with the 4 Supremes of Mang Mountain, which had caused quite a stir. The 7 individuals furrowed their brows, surprised that Chen was coming from their direction. This added a true enemy to the mix. After witnessing Chen's previous battle, they understood that none of them alone could defeat him in a direct confrontation. Their gazes briefly crossed, and a subtle consensus formed. Though Chen was powerful, if they wanted to prevent him from passing through, they would have to join forces to intimidate him, making him understand that, no matter how strong he was, he still had to follow the rules in such a place. Chen looked calmly at the gazes directed toward him, his handsome face still serene. He likely knew the 7's intentions, but he showed no sign of retreating. Instead, he took a deep breath, and his black eyes slowly grew sharp. What did it matter if 7 Supremes tried to stop him? Chen's steps had been unstoppable even by super-strong figures like Luo Heavenly God, let alone these characters before him. The road ahead was filled with thorns. Even if he had to fight through it with blood, he would fearlessly charge forward. Boom! Chen's foot stomped the ground, and the space behind him immediately twisted. The Supreme Sea appeared faintly, purple flames rising, and visible spiritual energy shockwaves radiated from his body. The surrounding Lin Hai collapsed, trembling under the force. Whoosh! With a heavy stamp of his foot, Mu Chen's figure transformed into a streak of light, swiftly racing toward the great Luo golden pool. Stop him! Seeing Mu Chen ignoring them and heading straight for the great Luo golden pool, the 7 supreme experts roared in anger. Mu Chen was too arrogant. Did he really treat them as insignificant? Anger flashed in their eyes as, almost simultaneously, they struck. Towering spiritual energy threads shot out like raging dragons, faster than lightning, crashing toward Mu Chen. In the sky, Mu Chen's light form suddenly paused. Looking at the sweeping spiritual energy threads, his eyes flashed with coldness. He planted his foot firmly, and a dark beam of light shot from the top of his head, followed by an indescribable murderous aura that erupted at that moment. Within the light column, the great Xun'er demon pillar shot out, swelling in size to several hundred feet, like a sky-supporting column. Mu Chen held his hands in a hollow embrace and swung the great Xun'er demon pillar down heavily. The space in front of him cracked apart, and the overwhelming murderous aura made the world darken. Boom! The great Xun'er demon pillar slammed down, crushing the 7 spiritual energy threads into explosions. Its momentum remained relentless as it charged toward the 3 supreme experts ahead. The great Xun'er demon pillar, carrying shadows and a murderous aura, surged forward. The Linhai below was instantly torn apart. The 3 supreme experts, enveloped by the attack, had their expressions change as they sensed the terrifying power of Mu Chen's strike. Boom! 3 supreme Dharma bodies appeared almost simultaneously outside their bodies. Their massive forms collided with the great Xun'er demon pillar, causing a storm to erupt. The surrounding Linhai was destroyed, turning into flat ground. The 3 supreme Dharma bodies were blasted backward, their giant feet shaking the earth, leaving deep craters. As they steadied themselves, their eyes filled with astonishment. They finally understood the fear that the 4 leaders of Mang Mountain had shown earlier. The young man before them, once he truly struck, would undoubtedly go for the kill, showing no mercy. They looked up to see Mu Chen standing in midair. The great Xun'er demon pillar, emanating murderous energy, loomed behind him, its presence as overwhelming as an ancient demon god. The slender youth, with his black eyes seemingly burning with fire, displayed no emotion on his handsome face. However, his gaze caused their hearts to tremble. It was a gaze filled with unwavering determination, as if nothing could shake his resolve. To move forward, the youth seemed willing to pay the price of his own life. Any enemy standing in his way would be reduced to ashes beneath his feet. Boom! As they stood shocked, Mu Chen moved again, appearing atop the great Xun'er demon pillar. The pillar then transformed into a dark streak of light and shot forward with incredible speed. If the 7 Supremes wanted to stop him, they could easily intercept him. Because they sensed the chilling murderous intent from Mu Chen, the latter's unwavering gaze made them realize that if they took action, the young man before them would likely engage in a fight to the death with them. They had worked tirelessly to reach this point in their cultivation, so they greatly valued their lives. The quota for the great Luo golden pool was indeed precious, but when compared to their lives, it was insignificant. Moreover, even if they ascended to the great Luo gold terrace, they would still have to face the even stronger 4 great commanders. Thus, fighting someone with such a determined and ruthless mind seemed like a poor trade-off. The gazes of the 7 flashed continuously, filled with hesitation and inner struggle. But Mu Chen ignored them. Standing atop the great Xun'er demon pillar, the wind howled, lifting his robe, and his eyes blazed as if flames were surging within them. Below on Golden Pool Peak, countless people held their breath, watching the scene. Mu Chen charging into the encirclement of the 7 Supremes alone was visually striking. Tang Bing, Tang Ro, and the others gripped their jade hands tightly, their hearts rising to their throats. Yet, despite the intense tension, they found it impossible to look away from the young man before them. The boy, perhaps even younger than them, had a presence that completely overwhelmed those of the same rank. Under the gaze of countless onlookers, Mu Chen finally broke through the encirclement of the 7 Supremes, but he did not stop. His face remained calm as he activated the great Xun'er demon pillar and charged straight ahead, brushing past the 7 Supremes. Throughout it all, the 7 Supremes made no move. In fact, As Mu Chun passed them, they secretly exhaled in relief. The boy's gaze made them realize that if they were to act, even if they managed to stop him today, the price would be disastrous. They could not fathom why such a young man possessed such a determined and fierce gaze, but years of cultivation had taught them that this was not someone to provoke lightly. Thus, they all helplessly shrugged and resigned themselves. This boy's future achievements would certainly be extraordinary, and his steps were not something they could halt. The crowd below Golden Pool Peak erupted in shock when Mu Chun passed through the encirclement. Many powerful figures appeared stunned, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Without being involved, they naturally couldn't understand the actions of the Seven Supremes. In the sky above, the three sovereigns quietly watched the massive spiritual light barrier. They looked at the young man standing atop the great Xun'er demon pillar, their expressions flickering slightly. This Mu Chun, his future is extraordinary. At last, someone remarkable has emerged from our great Luo heaven domain, one of them said. The drowsy sleeping king, who had been half asleep, suddenly opened his eyes. His pupils, deep like the night sky, held wisdom as he gazed at the slender figure. His voice was faint as he spoke. Hearing this, both the Heavenly Vulture Emperor and the Spirit Pupil Emperor were slightly surprised. After all, this was the first time in years they had heard the Sleeping King speak so highly of a junior. Even the four great commanders had never received such praise. The Heavenly Vulture Emperor, having good relations with the Nine Nether, chuckled, while the Spirit Pupil Emperor casually remarked, "There are too many geniuses in this world, and those with exceptional talent are as numerous as the stars. But in the end, only a few can truly stand out." The Sleeping King merely smiled in response, his eyes slowly closing again, becoming lazy once more. On the Lin High, Mu Chun, having broken through the Seven Supremes' encirclement, flicked his robe. The great Xun'er demon pillar returned to his body, and he shot through the air with a single step. Within a few breaths, the dazzling great Luo golden terrace appeared before him. He walked forward slowly and stepped onto the golden platform. The solid feeling beneath his feet made a faint smile appear at the corner of his mouth. He had finally reached the great Luo golden terrace. From here, the great Luo golden pool was within his grasp. The radiant golden terrace stood at the only path to the mountain peak, the golden light flowing like liquid gold, an extraordinarily dazzling sight. Mu Chun stepped onto the platform and surveyed the surroundings. The terrace stretched for what seemed like thousands of feet, vast and spacious. 5 figures stood before him, and remarkably, all 5 of them were individuals that Mu Chun had encountered before. Among them, for were none other than the 4 great commanders of the great Luo heaven domain, as expected. The 5th, however, was the burly man Mu Chun had met when he first entered Golden Pool Peak. To his surprise, this man had also managed to ascend to the great Luo Gold Terrace. As Mu Chun scrutinized the 5 figures standing on the great Luo Gold Terrace, their gazes converged on him. Apart from Wu Tian and Chao Feng, whose eyes were filled with a chilling coldness, the other 3 showed clear signs of surprise. It seemed they had witnessed Mu Chun break through the encirclement of 7 Supremes earlier, and it had not escaped their notice. This scene was enough to leave them shaken, as they understood that Mu Chun's ability to deter 7 Supremes at that moment was not due to sheer strength, but rather a daunting aura that instilled fear. In this world, while there are many geniuses and many individuals with extraordinary talents, those who ultimately become renowned superpowers are the ones with unshakable willpower and an extraordinary presence. This presence could be understood as a fearless, undaunted spirit, one that never shrinks in the face of any opponent. Even if the path ahead is a towering mountain that seems impossible to overcome, such a person would charge forward without hesitation, even if it meant a deadly struggle for survival and a chance at rebirth. The calmness Mu Chun had displayed earlier had left them somewhat rattled. In fact, the shock they felt now was even stronger than when Mu Chun had defeated the 4 Supremes of Mang Mountain. Thus, even Su Qing and Zhou Yu, the top 2 among the 4 commanders, looked at Mu Chun with a more serious and respectful gaze. How interesting. I didn't expect 2 dark horses to emerge this time. You're much stronger than before. A laugh rang out. It was Wu Tian, who was grinning as he sized up Mu Chun and the burly man. his smile tinged with mockery and playfulness. Mu Chen's expression remained calm as he took a slow step forward, moving toward the north corner of the terrace. With him included, there were now 6 people on the Great Luo Gold Terrace, but there were only 4 spots available for the Great Luo Golden Pool. This meant that 2 of them would inevitably be eliminated. Those who had managed to reach this point, overcoming numerous obstacles to ascend to the Great Luo Gold Terrace, were all among the top young talents in the Great Luo Heaven domain. Defeating 2 of them would be an even greater challenge than any previous battle. Mu Chen's gaze subtly shifted as his body appeared relaxed, yet the spiritual energy within him raged like a roaring dragon, ready to unleash terrifying power at any moment to counter any attack. As Mu Chen remained silent, the other 5 on the gold terrace also stopped speaking, but an undercurrent of tension could be felt among them, flowing through the platform. Which 2 of the 6 would be eliminated? Below the Golden Pool peak, all eyes were focused on the Great Luo Gold Terrace, and many people's expressions were tense. After all, this could be the final battle. Once the outcome was decided, the 4 spots for the Great Luo Golden Pool would be claimed. From the current situation, it seemed Mu Chen and the burly man were the most likely to be eliminated. Despite their dark horse status, they were still relatively weaker compared to the 4 great commanders, who were already famous. Under the intense gaze of the crowd, Wu Tian's snake-like eyes slowly turned, finally landing on Mu Chen and the burly man. With a smile, he said, "You 2 are newcomers, so for the final battle, we'll let you choose your opponents. This is our way of showing respect to you. Of course, choosing each other is also an option. That might make things easier." His smile was somewhat sinister, and the underlying intent was crystal clear. He wanted Mu Chen and the burly man to fight each other first. Once they were worn down, they could then fight for the final spot. Mu Chen's expression remained unchanged, and he didn't pay any attention to Wu Tian. Wu Tian smiled, but wasn't bothered, and his gaze shifted to the burly man. Under Wu Tian's gaze, the burly man's eyes flickered. From the situation before him, it was clear that Mu Chen seemed like the easier opponent to deal with. In the depths of his seemingly humble black eyes, it was as if a fierce tiger lay hidden, one that would devour anyone once it exploded. To him, if he had to choose an opponent from the 5 before him, he certainly didn't want to face Mu Chen. Such a person, if made an enemy, would undoubtedly make him restless. The burly man's eyes flickered, and after a deep breath, he revealed a friendly smile toward Mu Chen. He then turned to Wu Tian, clasped his fists, and said with a smile, "Fong Lei from the Lion Tiger Mountain under the Great Luo Heaven domain. I hope Lord Wu Tian can enlighten me." As soon as his voice fell, Wu Tian's expression darkened. His eyes, as cold and sharp as a blade, locked onto the burly man. He hadn't expected this guy not only to foil his plans, but also dare to provoke him directly. Now, with all 4 great commanders present, this guy chose to challenge him, as if he thought Wu Tian was the weakest among the 4. Such provocation was something Wu Tian couldn't tolerate, so he sneered, revealing his sharp, white teeth like a wild beast. "Good, very good. You truly have some courage." Mu Chen was somewhat surprised by the burly man's choice. On the surface, he seemed much less threatening compared to someone like the burly man, who was one of the 4 great commanders. However, Fong Lei was willing to risk offending Wu Tian by choosing not to fight him. This action was indeed unexpected, but this choice worked in Mu Chen's favor, as it allowed him to avoid being worn down by a war of attrition. He nodded slightly toward Fong Lei and then took a slow step forward. His gaze, cold and sharp, swept across the 4 great commanders, eventually passing over Su Qing and Zhou Yu, stopping only on Wu Tian and the calm-faced Zhao Feng. The new commander of the 9 Nether Palace, Mu Chen, would like to request guidance from Commander Zhao Feng. As Mu Chen's calm voice echoed across the Great Luo Golden Pool, the air seemed to freeze. Beneath Golden Pool Peak, the atmosphere exploded in an instant. The crowd erupted in surprise, with countless people staring in shock, their eyes sparkling with interest. Everyone knew the past relationship between Zhao Feng and the 9 Nether Palace, and now Mu Chen, as the new commander, had met the former leader of 9 Nether Palace. If they clashed, it would certainly be fascinating. People were eager to see whether the former commander, who had betrayed 9 Nether Palace, was stronger, or if Mu Chen, brought back by 9 Nether, would prove superior. Had 9 Nether made another mistake in choosing a leader? Would they get it right this time? Amidst the uproar, the 9 Nether guards, stationed in the direction of the 9 Nether palace, wore cold expressions, their eyes filled with hatred as they glared at Xiao Feng. The latter had once betrayed 9 Nether palace, abandoning them, and for the guards, nothing hurt more than a leader's betrayal. Tang Bing and Tang Rou clenched their small hands, their delicate faces revealing an unmistakable tension. Although they knew Mu Chun and Xiao Feng would eventually face off, when the moment came, they couldn't help but feel waves of unease. Xiao Feng's betrayal was a deep wound for 9 Nether Palace, and they knew 9 Nether still carried some bitterness over it. After all, anyone would find it hard to move on after being betrayed by someone they once trusted. This grudge, none of them could resolve. Only Mu Chun, as the new commander of 9 Nether Palace, could do so. He had taken Xiao Feng's place, and it was up to him to erase the marks left by Xiao Feng's betrayal. Erasing those marks wouldn't be difficult. If Mu Chun could defeat Xiao Feng, he would prove to the entire Great Luo Heaven Domain that he, Mu Chun, was now the true leader of the 9 Nether Guards. From then on, the names of past leaders and their legacies would be overshadowed by his brilliance. The former traitor would gradually fade into obscurity, and 9 Nether Palace would shine with its rightful leader. Of course, all of this depended on Mu Chen's strength to remove the stains left by Xiao Feng. The upcoming clash between the two would reveal everything. Perhaps countless people in the Great Luo Heaven Domain were waiting for this very moment. Would 9 Nether Palace finally be redeemed? Beneath Golden Pool Peak, as countless exclamations erupted into the air on the Great Luo Gold Terrace, Xiao Feng also let out a faint smile. He fixed his gaze on Mu Chun, a cold, icy arc slowly curling at the corner of his lips. Mu Chun's choice of him as an opponent. Wasn't it exactly what he had hoped for? He wanted 9 Nether to know that his excellence was something no one could replace. Xiao Feng slowly exhaled a puff of white breath, then took a step forward. Raising his palm, he gently curved it toward Mu Chun, his eyes gleaming with a cold, blade-like chill. At the same time, his soft laughter echoed lightly across the Great Luo Gold Terrace. Challenging me?